welcome back. After the break, we're now ready for our next panel discussion. Our lives have become increasingly virtual, and platforms like social media and gaming are a key part of our day-to-day lives. And governments, regulators, and brands around the world need to ensure that users globally can enjoy the many benefits of these platforms whilst being protected by the wide range of rapidly evolving harmful content and activity. So in the next panel discussion, we'll look into the current threat landscape, learn more about the new wave of innovative solutions focusing on trust and safety, and dig into the new regulations tackling online arms. This complex policy context, we're very lucky to be guided by our very own head of privacy, security, and online safety. Please welcome on stage Daniel Fitter.
Brilliant. Well, thank you everyone for joining us again, and welcome to a really exciting panel that we have this afternoon on online safety by design. We're going to be exploring how tech innovation and better service design can help us tackle harmful content, conduct, and contact, and how we can build a safer digital experience for users. So, as Chiara said, I'm Dan. I lead Public's work, advisory work for privacy, security, and online safety, working with UK and international governments around building and preparing for online safety legislation, supporting the growth of a responsible digital economy globally. So I'm delighted to be gathered together with a panel of experts from across regulators, law enforcement, international government organization, and the tech industry to have a really exciting conversation. So please do give it up for our panelists. And so just to get us started, maybe, Amy, if we can start with you, and if you could sort of introduce yourself, your perspective on online safety, and particularly sort of where you're coming from to the problem of online safety.
Thanks, Dan. So I'm Amy Jordan. I'm the Tech Policy Director at Ofcom, the UK's communication regulator. We'll shortly be taking on new responsibilities for regulating online safety after the Online Safety Bill hopefully safely makes its way through the UK Parliament. What we've been doing at Ofcom to prepare for this role is really digging into and learning more about the harms that users experience online and how we might understand and what we might expect of platforms we regulate in terms of the risks that users encounter and how we will expect services to mitigate those risks. So what do we know? I mean, we've undertaken a lot of research already. There's a lot more to come. Obviously, online services sit at the heart of all of our lives. They bring great benefits, as we all know. They're how we communicate, get our news, get our entertainment, and as we've heard a lot about today, they also enable us to participate in society. We also know they're integral to our experience from an increasingly young age. Our research has found that over 6 in 10 8 to 11-year-olds have social media profiles, even though many of them shouldn't really, but they do. And people are increasingly concerned about the harms that they're experiencing online. 1/3 of the UK adults feel that the risks have started to outweigh the benefits of being online. 4 in 5 adults have concerns about going online. And over 6 in 10 have experienced potentially harmful behavior in the last 4 weeks, and that number is rising. 1/3 of children aged 8 to 15 have also said they experienced something worrying or nasty. Now, we know that companies, especially the ones we're going to be regulating, have grown really quickly and continue to do so and evolve, and haven't always prioritized user safety. This is starting to change, but it's often reactive, it's not standardized, and there's very little, although again, growing transparency over the measures that platforms are taking. So what's happening in the UK is we are bringing forward principles-based, proportionate legislation that recognizes the great things about being online, whilst also protecting users from harm. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about how we're planning to do that today.
Thanks, Amy. Greg.
Thanks very much, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Greg Mounier. I'm working for Europol, which is the grey building next door. Europol is the European Police Agency for Law Enforcement. Our main mandate is to support national law enforcement agencies to collaborate on cross-border crime and investigations. We support investigation from counterterrorism to cybercrime, financial fraud, or any types of crime, actually, as soon as it is borderless. I'm actually leading the Innovation Lab within Europol. This is a new structure that aims at promoting innovations in the field of law enforcement, trying to make sure that we find synergies between the different national law enforcement agencies in the new tools, new innovative tools that helps the investigator to carry out their mission. And I'm coming on this panel from the law enforcement perspective, obviously. And I've worked in the past in the cybercrime division, so I was involved a little bit in internet governance, but also in child abuse, for instance, the fight against child abuse online. And this is really a crime that is close to my heart. And I really think that it's, in order to set a little bit the background of this discussion, to really highlight the fact that you have people on the internet that are really making an extra effort and resorting to really wicked strategies to lure children, teens into situations that are really degradable. I'm, for instance, making reference to all the CSAM material that is being self-generated, people posing as teens and giving incentive to other teens to generate child abuse materials and then being blackmailed, manipulated. Last year, we also supported the German police to take down one of the biggest dark web forum where child abuse and offenders were exchanging information, and that really gives you an insight into their strategies and how well organized they are. They're very tech-savvy, they have the best InfoSec practices, and it's very difficult for the police to penetrate in these networks. The network that we busted last year was comprised 400,000 registered and active users, which give you a little bit of an idea of the size of the community and the extent to which they're really trying to get into this crime. And so, you know, from this online safety perspective, of course, from the law enforcement perspective, we welcome any types of initiative using new technologies that will allow the private sector that owns the internet infrastructure to actually detect at an early stage any types of child abuse materials. And yeah, that is really the background that I wanted to share right now. Innovation is really important, and using technologies in the internet to prevent crime is really critical.
Brilliant. Thanks, Greg. Irakli, coming from a sort of international governmental organization looking at this from a number of lenses, including human rights, please.
Right. Thank you, Dave. And thanks a lot for the organizers to actually put this wonderful conference together and summit and inviting me here as well. My name is Irakli Beridze. I'm head of the Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics for one of the UN agencies called UNICRI, and the center actually is here, established in The Hague, in the City of Peace, Justice and Innovation. Our initiative at the UN was probably one of the first AI governance and technology solution sort of initiatives within the United Nations, starting back in 2014-15, and later we set it up, the center, which is mandated to support UN member states, 194 of them, in their understanding of how to use technology like artificial intelligence and other related exponential technologies to find solutions to solve crime-related problems. We're working in the area of crime prevention, criminal justice, rule of law, human rights, And the other aspect of our work involves how to solve these problems in a human rights compliant manner, in a responsible, in a right way, without creating larger problems as well. Within that, we actually have numerous projects. Some of them are very practical, where we build tools and solutions sexual exploitation and abuse of children been mentioned by our colleagues and friends here. We've built a specialized hub, global hub, with 55 artificial intelligence tools in it to be used by all UN member states to combat sexual exploitation and abuse of children online. For example, we just launched the hub 2 months ago, and we have already 60 countries using it, and we're moving to the next phase, where we're going to be training every single law enforcement agency or a country in the world in the years to come to use and to understand, on the one hand, how to use these tools, and on the other hand, to see how to do this in a responsible, human rights compliant manner. We're also working in the area of AI governance for the law enforcement, and with partnership of Interpol and European Commission and many other agencies, including Europol here, we are building a specialized toolkit. It's a sort of a policy guidebook, practical guidebook for global law enforcement, to ensure that artificial intelligence is used to solve crime-related problems. And it's probably one of the most sort of sensitive areas and sensitive use case areas of artificial intelligence, law enforcement being, like we talk about the issues related to face recognition technology and many others, and to do it in a human rights compliant manner. There's going to be a practical toolkit launched next year, and years to come, we're going to actually pilot it in the countries and ensure it is done. So at the end, what I would like to sort of mention is that online safety is probably a critical issue which we are going to face in the years to come. Why? Technology is being developed exponentially. It's been sort of, it is developed much faster than regulations, and what we need to ensure is that regulations serve the purpose of ensuring that technology solves the problem, but at the same time does it in the right way, and it's a very challenging and complex process. While technology is going very fast, while we're collecting enormous amount of data, and it is projected by 2025, we're going to have 175 zettabytes of data collected worldwide, which making sense of it would be very difficult by any individual or group of individuals. Therefore, what we're predicting is that in 3 to 5 to 10 years, all of us will be dependent on the AI type of tools. But at the same time, we would need policies and governance structures to ensure that it is done in the right way. So I'm not going to hijack the conversation, moving to others as well, but ready to answer other questions.
That's a great segue for Ian to introduce himself.
Yes, so hello, I'm Ian Stevenson. I chair the Online Safety Tech Industry Association, which represents about 40 companies at the moment. It's growing fast, all of whom share a common sense of purpose around addressing problems in online safety. You've heard about the scale of the challenges. It is an enormous problem, and there isn't a silver single bullet that's going to fix it. But one of the experiences I have is that very often the debate focuses on what we can't do and why it's really difficult. And on the one hand, you have a group of people who are saying, we can't let children continue to suffer this level of abuse. We can't let the public be exposed to fraud, scams, and disinformation, or whatever it might be. On the other hand, you have a group of people saying, well, it's technically impossible to solve online safety. We don't have complete solutions. There are real issues with privacy and freedom of speech. And so we end up in this sort of impasse talking about what isn't possible. The companies I represent are all delivering solutions today that solve pieces of the puzzle of online safety. They're not complete solutions to the problem. They all have to be part of a system and set of processes. They are all, at some level, incomplete. But they are the things we can do today. They are the voice of hope that lets us demonstrate what we can do now, and then we can keep building on that. So as well as chairing the industry association, I'm also the chief executive of a safety tech company called Cyabomb. We provide software to law enforcement and to social media, cloud and messaging companies to find and block harmful content. We're focused on child abuse and terrorism in our work with law enforcement. We're broader in our work in social media and messaging, where we focus on providing regulatory compliant, privacy by design and security by design solutions that solve real problems. Not every problem, but there are things that we could be doing today to make online experiences safer.
Brilliant. And we'll move next into sort of a look at the threat landscape before we explore sort of how we build and innovate. And really sort of building on sort of some of the conversation around the law enforcement. Obviously, we've come out of the pandemic where our digital lives as society have grown almost exponentially, where the amount of sort of self-generated content is growing, and at the same time, millions of new users are being connected to the internet around the world, in the Middle East and Africa in particular. Obviously, in that context, the threats are growing. So I guess to begin with, what are you seeing as the kind of the current online safety threat that you're most concerned about, and how are you seeing perpetrators innovating? I don't know who wants to kick us off. Irakli.
Oh, sure. Look, I mean, there are many type of issues. We can talk about it right now. But look how internet has been evolving as well for the last 25 years or so, right? Starting from the flat internet, what we call it like Web 1, which was just there for us to collect information. And then we quickly moved into an interactive internet right now, where we are all contributing to the content, and we're all bloggers and all writing and sort of uploading and everything. And then we're kind of at the stage of the Web 2, where we're moving to the Web 3 type of involvement, where we will be either owning portions of the internet or actually going into the virtual way of interaction, and that's where we talk about the issues related to the metaverse, virtual worlds, whatever sort of a name you want to give it to. And that creates enormous opportunities on the one hand, and it is going to be actually a sort of I'm an optimist by nature, so a wonderful world where we will be creating numerous employment opportunities, educational opportunities, healthcare opportunities within those virtual worlds. But at the same time, if you look at it, virtual worlds have no borders as well. So you can have actually limitless opportunities for criminals and other perpetrators to operate freely in the places where we would have very difficult sort of ways of governing it and policing it, or at least numerous challenges of governance and policing within those virtual worlds, where we will have a lot more participants in the years to come as well. We just launched actually a research paper on the gaming and the metaverse, and over there we talk more about the dangers of the sexual exploitation, abuse of children within those virtual worlds, and the report is available on our website, so I encourage all of you to have a look at it if you're interested in this subject. But a lot more will come in the future, and a lot more understanding, as well as the sort of a policy frameworks would need to be created, and understanding of policing from the law enforcement side to see how we will be operating or living, working, educating ourselves, and actually existing within this virtual world. Last thing I want to say on this is that sort of my personal prediction is that within the next 10 years or so, all of us will have one way or the other of existence within the metaverse or within these virtual worlds, and therefore it is quite on the urgent side that we have a proper understanding and put proper policies in place.
Amy, from an Ofcom perspective, and obviously with the UK online safety bill progressing, how are you thinking about sort of the threats and the harms that we're facing as a society?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously, again, something we're looking at a lot, and again, thinking about, what might come in the future, in the hope that we can build in, as we're talking about today, building in safety practices before we get to the point where we realize that these services have almost gone too far, that then you have to unpick things. So, we're already doing quite a lot of work looking at how immersive technologies are going to evolve, looking at kind of experience on gaming platforms, for example, seeing what we can learn from them, and also looking at kind of transitions between harm that might be perpetrated on kind of, Web 2, and how that might kind of dissipate into, different services and different ways of working. we've done a fair bit of research on the prevalence of different harms, how to understand how harms manifest, how the impact of harms might differ depending on the cumulative nature of certain harms versus sort of one-off harms. So there's lots of research available on our website if anyone wants to have a look. And there are also some common threads that we're seeing. So fraud and scams, consistently up there as one of the things that people are experiencing the most, including children on, largely child-focused services, which is particularly worrying. And then, harmful hate and hate speech is another one that's consistently kind of high when it comes to kind of users' experiences. And then more specific kind of grooming behaviours and CSEA as well, which again is obviously very concerning.
We've heard from Ian about the opportunity in the sort of technology landscape and how sort of innovators are sort of developing new products and services to counter those threats. Public and OSTIA have just recently launched an international State of Safety Tech report, which looked at the international market and did a landscape mapping, found 350 safety tech providers operating internationally. And at the same time, we're seeing the ecosystem, as Amy mentioned, beginning to explore how we can put design principles at the heart of good digital design and delivery. Ian, what are the innovative tools and collaborations that you're seeing delivering safer experiences online?
I think there is a huge diversity in what's being delivered, but the common themes that I'm seeing come out are collaboration, especially across between different organizations, because we've seen the emergence of a set of patterns of behavior which are being translated from one set of platforms to another, whether it's about how to effectively spread disinformation, whether it's about which fraud and scams work. The criminals are at the moment at least as connected as trust and safety professionals and safety tech companies. And until we get more connected than them and are collaborating, sharing data and working together on solutions, then there's a danger that we're going to be behind. But I think also, we've seen, so for example, we participated in a safety tech challenge fund. I think there were 5 or 6 safety tech companies involved in that. And actually some of the value that came out of that was really building understanding between different perspectives. So we were able to work directly with the Information Commissioner's Office on the privacy aspects of what we were doing, with various people from government on security aspects of safety tech solutions, with people from the National Crime Agency on how they saw the threat landscape, and directly getting people from a safety tech background, a privacy background, a regulatory background on the security side, and from the threat background together in the same room to actually work through what the issues are and then think about how we innovate around it. I think that's where a lot of the great outcomes are going to be.
Thanks, Ian. And Greg, from a law enforcement perspective, how are you approaching sort of innovating around tools and toolkits?
Well, so innovation is a team sport. So especially when you work for a new agency, you have to work with 27 member states and more. So the idea of the Innovation Lab in particular is really to build a space where inventors, innovators, end users, practitioners can meet, and then innovation happens because you have this meeting place between the inventor and between the one providing technologies. So the Innovation Lab is involved in many research and development projects together with the private sector, but also with academia. We have also established what we call the Europol tool repository, which is only available for European law enforcement agencies, but where you can, in a collective fashion, share a tool that you've come up with, either with the private sector, the academia, or that really support investigators. And then we make it available for free for the law enforcement community in Europe. So that's really a way of fostering innovations in the law enforcement community, relying upon the goodwill of our private partners and to really promote innovations. What I wanted to say as well is we all know that criminals are early adopters of new technologies, and I want to comment also on what Irakli was saying about the metaverse and any types of digital environment. We've also created a working group of law enforcement people looking into best practices on how to establish police presence online. We call it the metaverse, but of course, we're talking about any types of digital environments. In particular, if you talk to your kids who are spending 2 or 3 hours a day on Fortnite or Roblox, then this is the metaverse for them. They don't really ask themselves, how do we have the metaverse? Of course, they have this digital permanent environment where they engage with people from around the world, they do transactions, they play, they have their social life there. And one thing that came out of this report is really the police needs to be where the citizens are. And if it is true that in the next 2, 3, 5 years, we are spending more and more time in this digital environment, then we need to find a way, innovative ways, not only for investigating crime, but also preventing crimes. And so, for instance, we found out that the Nordic countries, in particular Norway, has already established a number of police units that are patrolling either social media, but also online gaming platforms. They have developed a number of really innovative tools to gather evidence, to engage with the public. And that's also something that we are promoting within the European law enforcement community. We're going to establish presence of Europol and different police agencies on different digital environments. And I think this is a way of trying to promote safety online. And the last point I wanted to make on this is really engaging early with the regulators, but also with those companies who are developing the infrastructure in order to make sure that the infrastructure we have has safety by design built in, and that we don't replicate the mistakes we've done with social media a few years ago.
I think that's a really good point. A lot of the conversation when you're talking about innovation in online safety is really about post hoc. The content has already been seen, it's been interacted with, and it's damage limitation at that point. But a lot of really where we're coming from a human-centered design point of view is thinking about safety by design. I wonder, maybe Amy, you've already mentioned it, but if you could sort of build on safety by design and how from an Ofcom perspective you're looking to balance the kind of post hoc and the more upstream design-led approach.
Yeah, so I think one of the kind of the fundamental sort of premise of the online safety legislation is that it's all based on an assessment of risk. So we will be expecting services that fall within remit of the legislation to conduct pretty comprehensive risk assessments, which assess how all the different functionalities that they use as part of their services, so recommender systems, other technical tools, and combined with kind of the types of content and how their service is kind of marketed, and how that all kind of combines to present a kind of holistic picture of risk. And then what we'll be expecting platforms to do is to look at how they're going to mitigate those risks and what tools they have in place, and to be able to demonstrate that those tools can adequately address the risks that they've identified. And when it comes to the most serious of harmful content, so what's called priority illegal content in the online safety legislation, then we will be expecting platforms to take kind of steps in order to prevent such material being presented to their users. And then for the slightly lesser level of harmful content, to make sure that that is swiftly taken down when it's identified. So as part of all of that, kind of driving an appreciation of risk and consideration of what tools need to be used, we hope to really just change the culture, really, in services to help them make sure they're thinking about risk from the outset and not, as you say, that kind of post hoc, oh, we better just take it down when we find it then. So it's a kind of systems and processes approach rather than just a kind of content moderation type approach. And also, we're hoping to kind of drive up standards across the industry by increasing transparency of what good looks like and what best practices are out there. But as Ian, has already said, there's not, we're not expecting kind of silver bullets here or kind of panaceas that will solve all of this. It's going to be a kind of constant process of going back, checking the risk, checking how technology and perpetrators' methods have evolved, and then constantly kind of updating those mitigation measures and tools to kind of make sure that the platforms are staying on top of the risks. So it will be, a process of us sort of working, we hope, closely with the services that are in scope of the legislation to kind of help them through this process and work out kind of what they need to be doing and what good looks like here.
Did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with everything you've just said, Amy, but I'd say that safety by design can go a step further than that, because not everything is about, and I know you're not saying this directly, but we have these conversations where we talk about the most harmful content being taken down promptly, and then we're in danger of getting this idea that safety by design is about stopping it getting up or taking it down. And actually, there's much more to it than that. So we know that, for example, interventions around using age assurance can help change the way platforms work by making sure you've got the right users in the right place. You can build that in as design from the start. Platforms make choices about anonymity on their services. And by the way, there are situations where anonymity online is really, really important and is a valuable thing to allow. However, we also know that when people have provided personally identifying information to a platform, even if that's not being shared with other users, even if it's in a gaming context, if people have provided their real identity as part of a billing process, they know they can be traced and they just behave better. That is a design choice that platforms can make. Are they allowing users total anonymity? Is it you're known to the platform but not to other users? Or is it that you're completely identified? This changes how people interact. And there are lots of other things we can do, like signposting content. So we've started to see this happening on some of the big platforms. During the pandemic, Facebook put little warning messages under certain content, say to get reliable information on COVID-19, here's a good source. Now, that isn't going to stop people with criminal intent. That isn't going to stop people who are passionately anti-vax from reading or believing that post. But it might well help a large number of people who are uncertain or unclear about that content is just think about it just a little bit more critically and make better choices. Twitter, with certain content, will blur it out because it will say, this is a graphic image, and it may be journalistically important, but we're not going to show it you unless you've explicitly consented to see that graphic image. All of these are examples of things that aren't about censorship or free speech or taking stuff down, which, by the way, for child abuse, we should be taking that down. You have no free speech for child abuse. I'm entirely on that side. But how can we build platforms where we say, oh, okay, actually, we're going to think about identity. We're going to think about appropriate use of age assurance. We're going to think about providing flags and warnings to people about the content or even tone of voice of what they're doing that are feedback that they can ignore, but that might just nudge them to behave in better ways and create a safer online world.
Absolutely. I mean, just to come back on that, I think we will be expecting platforms to use a lot of those measures, but what we won't be doing, unless in the most kind of egregious of cases, is mandating specific kind of tools or technologies, but we'll be expecting kind of platforms to look at what's most appropriate for them and proportionate to the risk that they've identified. But absolutely, age verification tools are something that we are saying to adult providers of video sharing platforms who we already regulate, that they need to get better. We said that in our report that came out a couple of weeks ago, and that's what we're going to be working with them on over the next year.
So looking forward to the future of the online safety innovation ecosystem, obviously we're at the GovTech Summit, and we're thinking about the global innovation ecosystem in online safety. Where do you each see for a critical sort of innovation need or an area of technology maturity that needs to be accelerated? And where do you see the opportunity for government or regulators to intervene, either sort of on a national basis or international? Does anyone who wants to take that? Greg.
Well, in our field in particular, we're keeping an eye on all the privacy-enhancing technologies. We're actually supporting most of the development in this field. I'm talking about homomorphic encryptions. I'm talking about multi-party computing. These technologies will really allow will be a game changer, really, for law enforcement and the work we're doing at Europol, for instance, because it will be allowing the cross-checking of information without sharing data, which is really important for safeguarding data privacy, but it also is a way where you can combine data privacy and the ability of law enforcement and the judiciary to actually do their work and fight criminal abuse online. So I think this is really something where we, at least from the lab and Europol perspective, are really pushing to develop more and learn more about those new technologies.
Right. I mean, from the global perspective, obviously, as I said it before, from 3 to 5 to 10 years, we will all be dependent on the AI type of solutions. We will be all dependent on technology type of solutions to make sense of the enormous amount of data which we are all creating, enormous amount of information what we are having, and unless we want to sort of stay without solutions, we would need to use those type of tools to actually optimize our solutions to come up with the new type of ways of solving problems. In that domain, we're talking about the crime prevention, we're talking about the criminal justice, we're talking about human rights, and that all of them will be combined into those type of solutions which we'll be coming up with. Now, at the same time, we will be accelerating sort of a governance type of structures, and having a global governance sort of frameworks is a very difficult thing, especially in an area where you have an exponentially growing technologies involved in it. So we will have technologies which is going to be constantly changing, and at the same time you need to come up with the governance structures which actually ensures that the risks are minimized and the benefits are maximized. So these are the type of challenges which we'll be facing in the years to come. And on the technology side, we'll have enormous type of opportunities to solve problems which we've never thought were possible to be solved, but at the same time, what we need to ensure that all of that is done in a way without creating harm. Last thing I would say from sort of a global perspective, we are facing a very serious digital divide, global digital divide. Countries are adopting their national plans on artificial intelligence, on exponential technologies, digital technologies, and those countries are around 50, 60 countries. And then you have 1/3 of the, or 2/3 of the world, which has no strategies at all at the moment. And if that trend continues, we might actually face the world where sort of selected few will have enormous technologies, enormous knowledge, enormous potential accumulated on their side, and then we'll have a big chunk of the world with not much of it, and this is going to create a very uneven type of situation, and I would say kind of an existential type of threat to the way we've been living before. Therefore, it is very, very important to ensure that access to the technology is global, and we support those who have been sort of lagging behind with technology, with understanding, with solutions, with policies.
We're almost at time. We've had a lot of questions on Slido, so thanks everyone for sharing. One word answer from all four of you to one question: how do we overcome barriers to international collaboration in online safety? Keyword.
Talk.
Right, engagement and multi-stakeholder approach, that a lot of that type of gatherings what we're having right now is happening everywhere in the world.
Yeah, engagement definitely, but we have also to be realistic. We're not all sharing the same values, and it is indeed a barrier to sharing technology for safety online.
Amy, last word from you.
Yeah, Ian stole my word. Talk, yeah, collaborate. I mean, just do more of it. I agree with Greg. You know, we have to maybe focus on the stuff that we agree on and move forward on that, and try and find some areas of consensus to work forward on.
Brilliant. Well, with that, a round of applause for the panelists.
Thank you.